Hello, everyone. We'll let the last couple of people trickle in here. We do have a smaller audience today, so we won't wait too long before getting started. I'm just going to give it one more minute, see if a couple more people come in, and then I will kick everything off and we'll get it turned over to Chris. All right, so we might get a couple more people joining us, but we are going to get things started here. I want to thank everyone for coming to our webinar today. My name is Kaylee Carmel. I am the dispatch team lead here at CompuWorks, as a lot of you already know. On behalf of my team, I'd like to welcome you to today's training event with Chris Stone. We're always looking for new ways to serve our customers better. And with that goal in mind, today we've brought you a session called Getting Started with Intranets, specifically Microsoft SharePoint. Just a little bit of Zoom etiquette before we get started. For anyone who has a question during today's training, please use the Q&A button that you'll find at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It will bring up a dialog box where you can enter your question, and Chris and I will be fielding those during the Q&A session at the end, or possibly during the webinar, and we can answer them live or type up a response, depending on how they fit into the training. We'll try to get through as many questions as possible during our allotted hour, but we can stay on a little bit or always get you email feedback after the event as well. And then at the end of the event, we will follow up with a survey where we ask for your feedback and ideas on future topics that we could present to you. We do want to provide training that is relevant and that you guys need to run your businesses. So we really want to look for feedback from you. The next training we're going to be offering is security awareness, specifically for business leaders. So we did have a security awareness training a few months back, and this one will be tailored more towards you as the business leader rather than the end user. That's going to be on February 22nd at 1:30, and you can register for this event on our website at compuworks.biz/upcoming-training-events. Today, we have Chris Stone, who has been teaching and consulting on Microsoft since 2007. He uses everyday language and examples to teach the skills you need in these products. Chris holds a Bachelor of Commerce degree from the University of Victoria, and he approaches every class from the standpoint of how your organization works and how technology may be used to refine business processes and greatly improve your productivity. Chris gave us a webinar before, and he was definitely one of our favorites. So I'm excited to welcome him back.
Thanks so much, Kaylee, there. Much appreciated for the introduction. As Kaylee mentioned, and as you likely know, given that you signed up for this session, we're here today to talk about intranets specifically. And this is going to be a little bit of a discussion, as well as a demonstration on how to actually do it, because there's no point in me showing you, the little tricks on how to put things on pages if you don't know why you're putting the stuff on pages. So we're really going to address that first and then build on that with the knowledge around SharePoint specific components. So the first kind of question that I want to dive into today is, what is an intranet? So an intranet, unlike the internet, is a web page system set up for internal use in your business. This means that it's generally only going to be accessible to your own employees. Perhaps maybe you have some access for some external contacts, maybe a vendor or a contractor. or some vendors and contractors that you might be working with. But the intention is that it's not a publicly accessible set of information. It's an internally accessible set of information. And it allows you to organize and project that information out to the appropriate people at the appropriate time and in a relatively easy way for them to both consume, because it's a web page, it's going to be very easy for them to access. And at the same time, making sure that you have, control over that information, because if it's not going to be public, you can obviously include a lot of information that is proprietary to your organization. It could be, business processes, it could be human resource related, it could be all sorts of stuff. Generally speaking, intranets are going to cover a very large variety of information for your organization, and you'll break up intranet sites into various pages about the different components that are important to share with your organization. So like I mentioned, you might have some internal pieces where, you've got a human resources intranet page. Maybe that's a place where people can go and see the latest announcements coming out of human resources. Maybe they can access the forms that they need in order to fill out, if they're taking a vacation or they need to request some sort of, change in their work environment or something like that. Then we could have informational pages for our finance group for, what's the process for accounts receivables, what's the process for accounts payables. And maybe that stuff is stored there so that when one of your salespeople comes in or when one of your operations managers comes in, they can see what the process is for the organization. It's written down in a central place so that they can take advantage of that information without having to call up, reach out directly to the finance team and use up their time every time that question gets asked. Now, the thing about intranets as well is that they're generally going to be updated not by a single person, but by a large number of people within your organization, right? So if we've got a section for human resources, we've got a section for finance, maybe we've got a section for operations, perhaps we have a section for contractors, likely each of those different intranet sites or intranet pages is going to be updated by a different person within your organization, right? The human resources people are going to update the human resources page because they're the ones with the appropriate information. It's not something that we tend to pass off on an IT group because they're not the subject matter experts, the SMEs for that information. And this will come back a little bit later in our topic today when we talk about why SharePoint specifically, because it's all really going to be about making this easy for your users to be able to do this kind of updating and accessing of information. Another big question that comes up beyond just what is it for is when do you need an intranet? And this is a really, really important question because I personally have seen organizations implement intranets when they were not required and when they're not really beneficial for themselves. I've also seen organizations that have not implemented intranets when they long ago should have implemented such a system. When you need an intranet is based off of multiple different factors, but the primary one that's going to drive it is going to be the size of your organization. If your organization only has 4 employees, an intranet is probably not going to be the most effective way to share information. At that point, you're just too small for the time investment that it's going to take to set up the intranet to become valuable to your organization. When we're talking about an organization that has 20 people or 40 people, that's really where this is going to start becoming a significant benefit. At that point, your organization has reached a point where not everybody in the organization is talking to each other every single day, right? If you've only got 4 employees, there's a good chance that you're talking to everybody, if not every day, every other day. When you've got 20 employees, it's quite possible that you've reached a point where some of your employees rarely, if ever, talk to other parts of the organization. You've got a fixed finance person at that point. You've got a fixed human resource person at that point. You've got some fixed delineation of roles that really don't kind of overlap. And once you've lost that direct communications channel is really where an intranet can step in and be significantly beneficial because it allows you to have that information accessible. It also means that as your organization is growing, right, as you add new employees, that information is written down. It's not something that you have to kind of train everybody every single time as they join an organization, right? You've got a new salesperson coming on. You don't have to sit down with them for 3 hours or 6 hours or 12 hours and walk them through what the HR policies are, because you've written down the HR policies and you could say, here's where the information is accessible. Take some time, read through it. And if you have any questions, then you can reach out to us and deal with that. And that really makes onboarding new employees just that much easier. And, if you are a medium-sized business that's growing, I'm hoping that you're onboarding people regularly, because that's, kind of the whole point of growth, is to start getting bigger, have more stuff, and have more employees so that you can generate more business for your organization. Another thing that drives whether or not you're going to need an intranet and when you're going to need an intranet is the type of workers that you have in your organization. If you're an organization that's entirely computer-based, where every single employee is sitting in front of a computer for their entire working time every day, that's going to drive an intranet a lot faster than if you're a manufacturer, or if you're an alcohol distillery, where most of your employees are doing hands-on tasks related to the production of your product all of the time. Now, that doesn't mean to say that, a distillery doesn't need an intranet site. Obviously, those users will need access to a computer. Sometimes they're going to have to be able to receive, communications from management. And so that can be an effective way to do it. But if, only 4 of your employees are going to be on a computer on a regular basis, you might want to put a little bit less energy into an intranet. Whereas if you have a workforce that's, doing graphic design or marketing for an organization, you've got 20 people sitting in front of a computer, that information is going to be a lot more readily accessible, and you're going to have a slightly higher skill level for accessing IT components, especially, accessing web-based systems. And so that's going to be a little bit more beneficial in that situation. The last kind of consideration around intranet is the somewhat related to the first one, but it has to do with, where are my employees physically, and what types of devices those users are on, right? If you've got an organization, again, where you're all in a single office, where you've got, 20 people and you're all in a single open office space, the communication is going to flow a lot more nicely than if you've got, 20 employees in this office and 40 employees in this office and another 40 employees working from home. Anytime you've got a division of locations, or you've got a division of work from home workers, you're going to want to move towards a more kind of broadcast communication style, which is really what the intranet systems are about, because it allows people to access them kind of on demand, rather than having to work within the scheduled framework of asking questions to another person directly. The devices also matter, though they matter a lot less these days. One of the great things about SharePoint, and we'll talk about that in a second, is that really this intranet system is going to be accessible on a desktop computer. It's going to be accessible on a laptop computer. It's going to be accessible on a tablet. And even to some extent, these things do tend to be at least functional on cell phones as well. You probably don't want to go reading all of the HR policies while you're on your cell phone, because that's just a lot of text in such an environment. But it's definitely something that's going to be possible if they need to check on something or confirm a piece of information quickly. They can pull it up quickly, because the system these days is quite responsive. It's going to adapt to the size of the phone, and they'll be able to navigate it with relative clarity. Now, when it comes to intranet systems, I'm talking about SharePoint today, but SharePoint is definitely not the only game in town when it comes to intranets. It was not the first one in town. It won't be the last one in town. And it definitely is just one of the players in this game. And so a lot of people are wondering, why would I use SharePoint for this? Why would I not use one of the alternative tools that's available for this? And a lot of that is going to come down to what you're comfortable with and what you're already licensed for. If your organization already has Microsoft 365 licensing, you already have SharePoint. You don't have to pay extra for it. It's built into your Microsoft 365 licensing. And even your basic users who are only going to generally have, an inbox are still going to have the ability to access this system with the same login that they're using to access their emails, with the same login that they're using to access their Microsoft Teams. So it's one less login, it's no more cost. And in terms of what it does, in terms of the skill set and the feature set that SharePoint intranets have available to us, it's very comparable to other systems. Now, can you argue that this one system over here has this one feature and SharePoint doesn't have that? Yes, of course, there's always going to be differentiating factors, but when it comes to a lot of organizations, keeping it simple is usually a good strategy. And that's kind of the number one selling point for SharePoint, is that you already have it. It's already kind of integrated with the systems that you're using. So why not just take advantage of it? Now, the other selling point is that Microsoft's been doing this for 22 years now. This is not an unfriendly system. This is a system that has a lot of power. There's a lot of functionality and features in here that I'm going to show you as we go through a demo here in a minute that you can take advantage of. You can see on my screen here, this is kind of a demo communication site. It's very kind of modern looking, very clean. We've got some imagery, we've got some logos, we've got maybe some news, some calendar events. And as you go through this and kind of establish a basic intranet and then build upon it, you'll realize that you can start integrating components from the other Microsoft 365 applications that you already use. So for example, if you're using Microsoft Teams already, you can set up integrations with this, and it's hiding underneath there. But let's say in my team, I wanted to pull in the human resources intranet page. I can pull that directly into Teams. So the fact that Microsoft's ecosystem is so expansive allows us to integrate across multiple tools in order to make this even more convenient for your users and display or show even more relevant data for them, rather than them having to kind of separate into silos the way this is all set up. In terms of how SharePoint works with this, I really do want to just kind of walk you through what this looks like and how easy it is to set some of this up. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that this is going to just be a magical fix. Before the end of the session today, I am going to talk to you about 3 major pitfalls that are going to potentially occur with any intranet system that you might deploy. But I want to show you how SharePoint works so that you can understand how your users might be able to take advantage of this in order to kind of build your organization out in this direction. The other thing that we talk about before we get into the building is that there is a significant planning step for any sort of intranet. I don't want you to walk away from this session and go, okay, I'm just going to start up a page tomorrow and we'll just build out from there. Yes, that's possible. You can do it that way. It tends to lead to, you've seen those pictures of the houses where they, it was a trailer originally, and then they built a porch on the front, and then they wanted another bedroom, so they extended it out the back, and that's made of wood. And then they needed kind of a main area, so they built it out of brick, and it ends up looking like something that the Weasleys lived in Harry Potter. That tends to happen if you just do this without a plan, like it does in many aspects of technology. So coming up with a plan ahead of time does tend to be a great idea. Feel free to reach out to us if you want some information or a conversation about that. But it doesn't mean you need to spend 6 weeks planning it out. It just, at least jot down some basic ideas for your architecture before you actually go about doing this. In terms of actually building these sites, it's very, very easy. There's just kind of a couple of different options for how you might want to set it up. In my case here, I'm currently logged into my Microsoft 365 account, and I'm looking on my left-hand menu bar, my app launcher here, and I have down on the left-hand side a link for SharePoint. If that's not visible on yours, you can definitely always access it through the app launcher icon in the top right-hand corner. It should show up there, and if it doesn't, it's always going to hide in the all apps somewhere in here. But either way, we're looking in this particular case for SharePoint. And when we head over to SharePoint, it will show you any sites that currently exist that you've accessed within your organization. Most of the time, this is going to be based off of what you're currently doing in Microsoft Teams. Not everybody realizes, but Microsoft Teams actually uses SharePoint behind the scenes for things like file management. Any file you store in a team in Microsoft Teams is actually being stored in a SharePoint site that lives underneath that team. And those SharePoint sites are accessible via the SharePoint links here in Microsoft 365 if you want. So I can see there's my training demonstration team, there's my Smart Orcas team, there's maybe a health and safety team that's being suggested to me, like that. And so I've got those there, but I can also create my own sites in here. So if I don't want a site that's attached to a particular team, which often times I actually do, right? If I've got my organization configured with Teams properly, and I've got a finance team, why not use the finance site that's built as part of that team to have the intranet pages for that particular site? But if I want, I can just create fresh ones as well. I have an option up here to create a new site. I can click on that. It's going to ask me what kind of site I'm looking for. Do I want a team site or do I want a communication site? And generally speaking, this is going to be more the communication site style. And so let's say I wanted to set one up for human resources. Why not? So I type in a name. It's going to just make sure that the website address is available for me. I can select a language. If I'm a multilingual organization, I might want to have this in multiple languages, fully supported in SharePoint. If you want to do that, I can type in a description and then I click finish and it will spin around for about 10 seconds and give me a brand new SharePoint site. It's very, very easy to do this kind of thing. Just like that, I have a brand new thing. There is some built-in tutorial systems for SharePoint if you've not used them before. And obviously this course is not going to teach you all of the functionality, but you can definitely use some of the built-in help and tutorial functions in there. I'm just going to click maybe later for now, but there is some options built into the system to work with that. Once I've got my page, it's really going to be about customizing it to what it is that I'm looking for at this point. And to do most of that in SharePoint, there's a nice little edit button up here in the top right-hand corner. When I click edit, it's going to take this page and it's going to drop it into edit mode for me. It doesn't look a lot different because this is what's called a WYSIWYG editor. What you see is what you get. So generally speaking, to update the page, you're just going to click on things on the page and adjust them in where they are. Now, most of the current SharePoint Online system is going to use these menus that you'll see pop up as I click on various pieces. There'll be little menus that pop up that allow me to edit the parts of whatever it is that I'm seeing on my screen. And a lot of these are, again, very, very user-friendly. So I've got this one here. If I want to edit this, I can click the edit button. It's going to pull out some options on the right-hand side. I've got this set up, in a 5 tiles section. I could change this to be a different layout if I want to, like that. I can move the whole thing around. If I just drag and drop it with the move web part component here, I can duplicate and delete things. And then within each one, the one that appears in the bottom corner controls the actual tile. So if I click edit there, it's going to change the functionality on the right-hand side to, where do I want this to link to? And I can just change this to a different place in SharePoint. I can link this to kind of whatever it is that I want. I can set up a title that's right here. So, if I want this to say, welcome to our intranet, I can change it there. it's linking to, I don't know, something random right now, but I could link this to a welcome page. I could link this to nothing if I wanted to, if I just wanted to be visual. And then I can even change the image on that. And this is another place where Microsoft has done a massively good job of making this really easy for you. Before, when we were dealing with photos, especially, you would have to go to the web and find an image you liked and grab that image and download a copy of that image, make sure it was the right size, and then upload it onto your web pages. It was a very cumbersome process. Well, Microsoft realized that that was cumbersome for its users, and so it went out and purchased licensing for a stock photo system that has literally hundreds of thousands of images that you are already licensed to use because you're licensed with Microsoft. So I can look at this and go, okay, well, my page is about human resources. This isn't really human resources related. So I can click change on it. And I can browse for my own photos if I want, but I can also access this free stock photo system and access kind of whatever information I want. So maybe I type in human resources, which probably isn't going to give me too much, but it'll give me some stuff. Maybe I want people handshaking, or maybe I want, running, or whatever it is. If I'm dealing with finance, maybe I can type in finance and it's going to give me stuff, with stock tickers or money, or piggy banks or whatever it is. And you can see there's just thousands and thousands of photos here that are going to work great for whatever it is that you're attempting to do. Let me go back to my human resources here. Maybe I'll just search for people like that. There we go. And we'll, have people clapping. I don't know. You click insert. You don't have to worry about any of it. You just change it and it does all of the work for you like that. If you don't like it having a background, you can switch to a color, just a color block, or there's even an auto selected image where it will actually just kind of try to figure things out by itself. It doesn't always work very well at this point, but Microsoft's moving in that direction. I like the custom images. You can also do various other things when editing those images. With the stock images, we've got that there, but you can also search the web. You can access files that are stored on your OneDrive, on your sites. You can upload images or even grab them from links from other websites. So there's lots of options for getting that in and just customizing that based on what you're trying to do here. With the image, I can set the focal point. This is depending on the image size. Like if you've got an image that's a lot wider than it is tall, you can kind of slide things along to set the focal point on the image. This one is a bad example because it's just nice and square to essentially the same, totally blanking on the words, the same aspect ratio as this box right now. So it's not really giving me much, but you'll see it in other places where that can come in handy. And then you can also, zoom in or zoom out. And again, you can use the focal point with that. So if you want to focus on somebody's hands here, you can kind of set the image and crop kind of to the way the image looks for your particular purposes. One of the nice things about editing these pages is that you'll notice as I've been making changes here, it's been auto-saving these changes all along. So it's not like I'm working on this for half an hour and then I accidentally close it or my browser crashes and I lose all my work. Again, they're smart enough at this point. Microsoft is smart enough at this point to really make this as easy as they can. If I wanted to now go live with these changes, I can simply click republish, or I can save it as a draft if I'm not done working on it. I want to come back to it later. So I've got a lot of functionality around this. Once I've published it, I can hit publish, or I can schedule it for a launch at a particular time, right? If I want, these changes to go live on Monday, but I want to work on them the week before, I can get those ready. I can schedule it and it will go live on Monday and it will look like it does until then. So can also be another beneficial feature that's in here. Publish that, it's now live. Users accessing this page will now see the updated information. But there's far more than just changing a picture around on a link on those pages. Yes, we can do that, but maybe we don't want those at all. Maybe our focus for this particular page is more on informational. Maybe I want links to files, things like that. Within each of these, what are called sections in our pages, so that had a section with a hero. That's what that set of tiles is called. It had a hero web part. These sections allow us to add kind of whatever we want to our page. The section controls are on the left-hand side here. And each section has different settings. Again, just like we could change the web parts around, if we want one column or three columns or a third or whatever, or if we want it background shaded, we've got a lot of flexibility to kind of make this look and feel the way that we would want it to be for our users. So oftentimes I like this highlighting color to alternate between sections, just to break up the data, make it a little bit easier to read for people. Within these sections, though, we can add an absolute ton of different content. So the hero web part is great. It's great for main pages. But when I get down into a human resources site or an IT site or a finance site or an operations site, I'm going to need some other pieces of this puzzle. And I can click on this little add button here and add what are called web parts. And you saw that terminology a few seconds ago. But these web parts extend well beyond just the frequently used, image, text, links, people, into all sorts of different text, media, and content. So we can put, for example, buttons or calls to action. Those generally tend to be used more in larger organizations where, maybe you want some of your employees to register for training. That kind of thing can be useful. Of course, we can put pictures on there if we want. Image galleries that will allow you to show multiple pictures, or a carousel layout of pictures can be useful. Links, quick links. I'm going to actually show you this one here in a minute, but I'm just going to talk about some of these first. Spacers. If you've never heard of Stream before, it's another component of Microsoft's application. So if you have, again, Microsoft 365 licensing, there's a tool in there called Microsoft Stream. Microsoft Stream is like YouTube, but for inside your organization. If you've ever wanted a way to share videos in your organization, you can do that. Maybe on your HR site, you've got some training videos that you've recorded. You can have those uploaded into Stream. You don't have to worry about them leaking on the public web because you've stored them internal to your organization. And then you can just put them right on the page. Somebody can click play in the browser and it just plays away. If you want to pull in YouTube, you can absolutely do that. And of course, a text box to type whatever it is that you want to type. So text boxes are very, very commonly used. Beyond just text, media, and content, we can bring in things like documents, lists, and libraries. So this is especially useful if you're going to be doing things like uploading forms, or you need to present files that maybe you've stored in Microsoft Teams. Here, I have the ability, for example, let me put it on the right-hand side here, to pull in a document library. And I get to select from any of the document libraries that are stored in SharePoint. There's a default one called Documents. It doesn't have any documents in it at this point in time, but I can pull it in there just like that and republish it. And that document library is a live SharePoint location. So if I want to, upload a file, a form for somebody to fill out, or if I want to create a new document of some sort, it's fully interactive as part of that system. So here's some form I built for you, whatever, like that. And I don't even have to save this. I can literally just close it. It's just called document right now, but I can close it. If I refresh this page, I can already see I've got a document stored right there. And it just makes it very trivial to access the content, right? Instead of having to go into a file on a page and link everything that you want to attach, I can just simply have a document storage location. And every time I upload it, it's going to now become available on my human resources page. Very, very trivial to do in this system. There we go. I can also show actual files. I can pull highlighted content that might be, the latest content, the newest content, recent documents, saved contents, those kinds of things. Beyond that, I've got even more options in here. I'm not going to show most of these. Obviously, that's not what this is all about. But if your organization uses Microsoft Yammer, which is kind of like a communications Facebook-y style tool for organizations to communicate internally with among people, generally not going to be recommended at the 20 user size. This is more at the 500 user size. But if you're using that, you can pull those conversations in as part of pages. Viva Connections. Microsoft Viva Connections is another tool for functionality around getting people collaborating on content together. Twitter. I've seen organizations pull Twitter feeds onto pages. One of my clients does this in order to pull, they're a public organization, and so they pull the public Twitter feeds for all of their critical people onto pages so that everybody's kind of kept abreast of what's happening on social media for them. News, people, and events, countdown timers if you want. And events, this is pulling from an actual SharePoint calendar. If you've not experienced a SharePoint calendar before, that might not make a lot of sense to you. But you can have a SharePoint calendar, display information. Maybe, for HR, you've got upcoming events. Maybe you've got an intranet page for your entire organization. Hey, here's all of the upcoming events that are going to be happening for our organization in the next little bit. Maybe you're doing this around a project and you're just pulling in the project milestones. Whatever it was, you can pull it onto the page and make it visible in an easy fashion for your users. You can pull in org charts if you want. This is assuming that your Active Directory, which is the system that handles the logins for Microsoft 365, assuming it's set up correctly, you can pull in an org chart onto a page. You don't have to, generate it using some tool. It will automatically look at who everybody's manager is and then pop it up on the page for you like that. And this is actually one of my favorite web parts here for this, is that let's say I've got a human resources page and a finance page and an operations page and a sales page. One of the most challenging things that I've always dealt with is I go there, the information isn't quite enough. I need to reach out to somebody and communicate with them, but I don't necessarily know who works in HR. How do I communicate with these people? The people web part, when I put it on here, if I put in my name, for example, or the name of whoever works there, it's going to pull in a tile, and it doesn't need to be one person. It can be multiple people. Do I have anybody else in here? Mike. Oh, who else is in here? I don't even know. Anyways, you can have multiple on here. And the great thing about this is that it doesn't just show their name. Because, again, we have the integration across the Microsoft ecosystem. If I hover over a name or click on it, it will pull up a contact card for that user based on the system, based on Microsoft 365 and what it knows about them. So it's got my email in there. It's got a link to chat with me in Teams there. It knows who I work with. It's got potentially my boss if I've got that in there. If I'm working with that person on files, it will show me files that we both worked on together. If I've linked my LinkedIn profile, because Microsoft owns LinkedIn, it will pull that data in as well. So there's the thing for the org chart. I can see who I work with. If I had a boss in this system, this is just a demonstration system, so there's nothing there. But if I had a boss, it would show that there. Related files, etc. And I can even, from here, click and fire off an email by pulling up Outlook, or I can click here and fire off a Microsoft Teams chat by opening up Teams to start a conversation with that person right from that contact card without having to go searching in a directory elsewhere. It's right there on the page for me. And again, the whole point of these intranets is really to get that kind of information out to people, but at the same time also provide beneficial tools for getting people in contact with each other. And that's just one of the pieces that really stands out in my mind. I've used it on so many different organizations, and they love it. There's an organization I work with, they have 300 employees, and it gets used daily in order to allow that communication to occur. There's still more of these little web parts that we can throw on pages. We can throw in forms for people to fill out if we're using Microsoft Forms to build things. If you're using Microsoft Power BI, which is the business intelligence tool Microsoft offers, you can pull those onto pages. So you could actually have part of your intranet pages just be the reports that normally you'd have to, go to the document library, open up the whatever file, access the data that way. No, just splash it right on the front page, make it easy for people to get to. Bing Maps, weather. If your organization does things across multiple time zones, which a lot of organizations do, you can have on your pages, here's the Eastern time zone, here's the Central time zone, here's the Western time zone. If you deal with, the UK, maybe you've got GMT time in there for stuff, or UTC. If you're kind of a global organization, you can do all of that. And then you can also pull in even other stuff if you want, but I'm not going to talk about that last section. At the end of the day, you're going to end up with a site that ends up communicating the correct information out based off what it was that you wanted to do. So there's the human resources site there, but I'm going to head over to the training demonstration site. And this is kind of what a customization might look like for a particular site. Maybe you've got some quick links. That was the quick links web part there. Maybe you want to, obviously you wouldn't want to link off to Google, but maybe you link there. Maybe you link off to another page. Maybe you've got some news on the right-hand side. You've pulled in some common documents people are using, and maybe you want them to be able to type comments at the bottom. Really, the goal is to be able to customize this easily for each different group of users so that they can convey out to the organization the information that is relevant to their department or their breakdown. It doesn't need to be a department, their role within the organization to everybody else that needs that information kind of publicly. Now, flowers, roses, happy times. What's the downside? There are a number of pitfalls that you really need to be aware of with regards to intranet systems. Yes, they look absolutely beautiful when you do them correctly, but there are three major things that can go wrong with them. The first major thing that goes wrong with them that I've, again, seen over and over with organizations is that you'll come up with a plan, you'll architect something, you'll build out this beautiful intranet, and then people don't update it. An intranet where the pages are 2 years old is useless. This has to be something that is an ongoing effort by your organization to keep up to date, to be the go-to place. Otherwise, it will fail and people will not trust it because it becomes out of date, and then they'll use it even less because they don't trust it anymore, and it will slowly kind of fade off into this kind of Greek ruins type situation where it's nice to go look at it to see that historical stuff, but it doesn't work for the business anymore. Part of your process for rolling this out needs to be a mechanism for keeping it up to date. That means that somebody kind of should be in charge in the organization of going around, every 3 months and saying, is there something here that still needs to be updated? Why hasn't this been updated? Even if it's not their job to be the one updating it, make it somebody's job to wander around the intranet system that you've built and look for stuff that might need to be refreshed. And then they can be the one that goes out to, hey, HR, there hasn't been any new content on here in the last 6 months. Has nothing changed, or have you just not been putting it on here? And please take care of this. Make sure the page gets updated. And then they can check back on it, a week later, 2 weeks later, and reinforce that. It's some sort of governance around making sure this is up to date. And it's great because part of what you can do with these pages, if you want to, is look at when they were last modified. You can actually see historical versions of these pages if you're interested. So it's very easy from a governance standpoint to have controls in place and go, okay, this page hasn't been modified in 2 years. There's something wrong. You need to go fix it. Hopefully you don't let it go 2 years before you do that. But a lack of updates is by far the biggest failure I see with these. You spend a lot of time, you spend a lot of money setting these up, and then to let it go to waste just isn't the best investment. The second piece of this, and it's somewhat related to the first one, is that there needs to be an ownership within an intranet. Different organizations will pick and choose different ways to do this, and there is no right way to do it. But generally speaking, somebody has to own this. It either has to be, at a very high level. So, the CTO of your organization says, okay, IT owns the entire intranet. We're in charge of it. And if something goes wrong, or if people aren't updating, we're the ones that's going to yell at it or yell at you because of it. Or, and this is the kind of the other way that people do this, it needs to be a responsibility within each of the groups that have their own content, right? So it needs to be that whoever's in charge of HR has that responsibility. HR is mine, and therefore the HR site, it's my responsibility to make sure that that information is correct, that that is up to date. That ownership needs to be explicitly communicated when this rolls live. You don't just go, oh, hey, can you build your site? And then expect them to know that they have to always keep this up to date. It has to be something where you say, okay, Joe, this is your HR site. You're in charge of HR. You've built it out. Now keep it up to date. If you don't, the CEO is going to yell at you, because the CEO is going to hold you accountable for the intranet site that you're there. Or, if you do it the flip side, IT is going to be like, okay, you're going to be like, okay, you've set up this site. That's great. Please keep it up to date. IT will be checking on it, and they will be yelling at you, and you will get in trouble if you don't update it. So explicitly define who's responsible for it, who's responsible for updating it. And that will help ensure that this survives kind of long term. The last one is related to culture change within your organization. Rolling out an intranet is great, but if all of your people just keep sending out emails constantly saying, hey, here's the new announcement, people aren't going to be using the intranet nearly as often. If you want to use an intranet, the best thing to do is to go fully into an intranet as the primary internal communications tool for organization-wide data. Moving away from emails has a number of benefits. I'm sure that you've noticed that emails are not necessarily the best way to communicate things, right? If you have a policy change within your organization, something kind of important enough to warrant its own email, you could send the email and go, hey, everybody, we're changing the dress code. Crocs are not allowed by anybody anymore. We had too many people spilling whiskey on their shoes, whatever it is. That can go out via email. But the problem with especially kind of that medium-sized business, as you get larger and larger, is that, people can be on vacation. People could miss the email. Maybe people aren't reading all of their emails. Maybe people join, a week after that email came out and didn't get a copy of it. And it can cause problems with the communication in your organization. If instead of that, you kind of, maybe you're not using the hero web part, but maybe the main one has a big news web part right at the beginning, you can still broadcast messages out that way. But then those messages are going to be accessible in a much easier, more kind of easier to retrieve format than an email system. You might get 40 emails in a day. You might get 400 emails in a day. That might just scroll past your site without even knowing it. Whereas if you're changing policy and on a human resource site, you've just got, hey, here's the most recent 3 policy changes as part of a news component. It's going to be very difficult for somebody to miss that, assuming they're checking the intranet on a regular basis, which theoretically they should be, if you can get that culture change to be, hey, the intranet is the source of truth about our organization. This is where you go to find policies. This is where you go to find procedures for finance stuff. This is where you go to find data about what our salespeople are doing or where they physically are right now from traveling around. If you make this the source of truth, people are going to load up their Outlook in the morning, and then people will load up their intranet in the morning, and then they will continue on with their day. And that's really where you want to kind of reach with this. Because then it becomes a super effective communications tool. You can really eliminate some of those errors. You can eliminate some of that missed information. And you can make sure people are always looking at the most updated information because you've got it in one place. It's all been centralized for that. And again, with the onboarding, you've got that new person that comes on board. Hey, the information is right there for them. Easy to access and easy to take advantage of. So those are the three big pitfalls to watch out for. With this, I just want to kind of make sure that you know that there are some downsides or potential downsides. You can always mediate them. And they apply to kind of any intranet system. They're not, SharePoint specific. If I had to pick a SharePoint specific downside, I would say that the pages maybe aren't quite as flexible in terms of the layout as some other systems can be. But I mean, if you can't fit yourself into that nice little, sections system reasonably well, yeah, you're probably a web development company at that point, and maybe you want to take advantage of some, some HTML, CSS, JavaScript type stuff. But for most organizations, that's not going to be a huge problem. Drag and drop functionality to make it easy for your people is going to be a far more beneficial piece than, being able to go in and edit the code exactly the way you want it. So just like that. That pretty much wraps up what I wanted to talk about with intranets today. They can be very, very powerful. I've seen these work for, like I said, medium-sized businesses all the way up into absolutely massive organizations. I've got one organization that I work with that has 30,000 employees. It's a government organization. If they didn't have an intranet by that point, they wouldn't be able to function. It would be an absolute mess because of the fact that, HR can't communicate with that many people. They have to have a way to broadcast from a small group of people in HR to the wider audience. When it comes to IT, again, they can't, be picking up the phone and answering every single call. They do, of course, have that. But if they can answer 50% of those by putting some of the common situations in an FAQ on an intranet, it just massively reduces their call load and really makes it just that much better for their organization to function. So lots of potential financial benefits from time savings, from tying up less tied up users, being able to get more of their actual work done. I don't see any questions in the Q&A tool here, guys. Anybody have any questions at all about this tool?
Chris, I have a couple questions.
Go ahead, Kaylee.
While we let other people maybe mull it over as well and add things in. But what kind of restrictions are there? Like if you wanted to do pages that only some people in the organization wanted to see, is that an option?
Absolutely, Kaylee. That's an excellent question. Yeah. For those of you unfamiliar with SharePoint, which I assume is going to be most of you, SharePoint does have a built-in set of functionality called permissions, which allows us to control access to content within it. Permissions can be done at various different levels within SharePoint. So, for example, if you wanted to have, the sales intranet only accessible to salespeople and the management, you could go ahead and go into here and change the site permissions and say, only these people are allowed to have access. But this access is granular. If you had a human resources site, where did I go with my human resources site? Over here, and I wanted to have a bunch of information that was accessible to everybody, but maybe I wanted a page on, what's the process for, firing somebody, and I wanted to restrict that page only to management. I can go in for an individual page here. If I go ahead and create a page super quickly here. Oh, name can't be blank. How to fire someone, like that. And then I can go in for that particular page and I can change, oops, that's the site sharing. I can change in the page details. Nope, they moved it again. Bugger, where did they put it? They put it, they've hidden the thing. It's now hiding under here and here and how to fire someone. There we go. So in here for the how to fire someone page, I can go into this option here called manage access, and I can change who individually within my organization is going to have access to even just that one set of pages like that. So very granular access. It is a little bit more complicated to learn how to do that, but you definitely do have that capability if you want to take advantage of that.
Awesome.
The question here, is there a versioning options for documents like older versions of SharePoint? Yeah, that's not related to the intranets specifically, but absolutely, if you are storing documents in SharePoint, did I have a document library still? No, I didn't on this one. Where did I have documents? There we go. So here's my documents library with my document. Version history is enabled. In fact, by default, if you are using an older version of SharePoint, it wasn't necessarily enabled by default, but newer versions of SharePoint actually have document version history enabled out of the box on every single document that exists within that system. In fact, you actually can't turn it off anymore. They removed the option to turn off version history. You have to have it on at this point. Allows you to roll back or look at historical copies of documents. So an excellent question. Hopefully that answers that there for you. Kaylee, did you have another one?
It looks like there's one in the chat. Jackie's asking if two people can update a file at the same time in SharePoint.
More SharePoint questions. So maybe we should do a SharePoint session, guys, and talk about SharePoint document libraries at some point. Maybe when we get to the after survey, you guys should suggest SharePoint document libraries as a topic. But absolutely, again, I've totally lost where I am. If I go to my documents here, any document, any Office document, so Word, Excel, PowerPoint, or OneNote document that's stored in a SharePoint site, either being an intranet site or being in a Microsoft Teams, which is technically, again, a SharePoint site underneath, does have that functionality called co-authoring. Co-authoring allows multiple people to work on the same document at the same time. It's actually really cool if you haven't seen it. I don't have anybody else in here on this demo system with me, so I can't show it to you very well. But for example, a Word document, if this were to happen, what's going to happen is in the top right-hand corner, I'm going to get a pop-up that says, Kaylee has joined you in this document. It'll have her initials up here. And then I have this blinking black cursor where I can type, right? What will happen is that Kaylee, when she pops in, she will have a colored cursor. So maybe hers will be green and it will have her initials KC next to it. And I'll be able to see where in the document she is and where she's typing. And as she types, there might be a second or two delay as she's typing, but I'll be able to see any content that she's putting in. Super, super useful. Not usually on a one-page document, but if I'm doing a proposal for a client and I'm working on this and my colleague is working on it, they can be in their section, I can be in my section. We don't have to wait for our turn to work on a document. So co-authoring, super, super powerful feature, absolutely available in here. And again, integrated as part of all of this. Kaylee, any other questions we got going or?
My last question is just who can create the SharePoint pages in the intranet in your organization?
Yeah, that's going to really depend upon your organization. Again, it's a great question. Out of the box in an organization, kind of generally speaking, most people are going to be creating or at least have the ability to create. So that was on this page here. Most people are going to have that kind of power. There are a lot of organizations that turn that off. And generally speaking, if you've got a good IT department, they are going to turn that off, because one of the things that can happen with SharePoint is something called sprawl, which is the same kind of sprawl we see in cities these days, where we create too many suburbs, and there's all sorts of problems with that. So most IT groups, or if you're using a managed IT service provider like CompuWorks, then you've got kind of some support to turn that off. And then generally it's given to people that specifically need it, or it can just be on a request basis. So you might turn it off for everybody and then just have, a simple form. Hey, I'd like a SharePoint site. This is my justification. And then somebody can review it and go, do we have something for that already? Oh, no, that should go over here. Or no, that's a good idea. Let's go ahead and roll that out. Here's your access. Go ahead with all of this. So that's true, not just in SharePoint, but also with Microsoft Teams, who can create a team is usually controlled in a similar fashion for organizations. Excellent question, though.
Awesome. I think that's it.
Awesome. I'll stick around for a minute or two just in case anybody does want to type in a question, but thank you very much for joining. I'm going to pop back into our slides here and just let Kaylee talk for a moment before we wrap for the day.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. That was great. I'm excited to implement that here. I am going to advocate for CompuWorks creating an intranet because we don't have one. So our future topics, next month, we're going to be talking about security awareness specifically for business leaders. So it's a little bit different than the last security awareness training we had. So we hope you guys can join us there. And then in March, we will be focusing on OneNote specifically. So another Microsoft product, but a deeper dive. Yeah, a deeper dive into OneNote. If you guys have any questions about this webinar or anything at all, please feel free to email us at training@compuworks.biz or give us a call, 413-499-0607. You can reach out to us for anything. At the end of this webinar, please fill out the feedback survey. We are going to be taking into consideration all the trainings you guys want for us to host for you guys. So thank you so much for joining, and we hope to see you soon.